She agreed to marry a 73-year-old millionaire. Then came the shocking reveal. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The pen rests on the table, heavier than it looks. It is a standard black pen, nothing special, yet it feels like it weighs 100 pounds. Across from her sits a man who looks calm, almost gentle, his hands folded neatly, as if this were any other business meeting. He is 73 years old, a self-made millionaire, and in exactly 10 seconds, if she signs her name, he will become her husband. The room is quiet in that expensive way. Thick carpet, dark wood walls, a faint scent of leather and old books. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city moves on without noticing that a life is about to change forever. Her name is Claire Thompson. Claire is 26 years old, and nothing about her life has prepared her for this moment. The lawyer clears his throat, breaking the silence. He slides the document a fraction of an inch closer to her, as if the paper itself is eager. The words at the top are sharp and official. Marriage agreement. Temporary. Contractual. 7 days. That is all it says. 7 days of marriage. No love. No intimacy. No expectations beyond what is written in black and white. Claire does not look at the lawyer. She does not look at the man either. Her eyes are fixed on a small stain on the table, a faint ring left behind by a coffee cup. She focuses on it because, if she looks up, she might lose the nerve to do what she came here to do. This was never part of her plan. 2 weeks ago, she was standing in a hospital hallway, staring at a blinking red number on a billing screen. $187,000. That was the cost of keeping her mother alive. Surgery, medication, a recovery that would take months. Insurance had denied most of it. Appeals were pending, but time was not something they had. 3 days ago, the bank posted a notice on the door of her childhood home. Final warning, past due. And yesterday, her phone rang with an offer that sounded more like a cruel joke than a solution. Marry him. Just 7 days. In exchange, every bill would disappear. The hospital debt, the mortgage, even a small trust set aside to make sure her mother never had to worry again. No one had forced her to come. That was the worst part. She had chosen this. The man across from her finally speaks, his voice low and steady. Not cold, not warm either, just controlled. You can still walk away, he says. Nothing has been signed yet. Claire almost laughs at that. Walk away to what? To the hospital room with machines humming through the night? To a house that no longer belonged to them? To a future built entirely on apologies she could not afford to make? She lifts her eyes at last. Up close, he looks older than she expected. Not frail, but marked by time. Silver hair, lines around his eyes that suggest he has smiled before, though not recently. His suit is tailored perfectly, understated, the kind of wealth that does not need to announce itself. This is not a romantic man. This is not a desperate man. This is a man who has already decided that love is no longer part of the equation. The lawyer speaks again, carefully. For clarity, Miss Thompson, the conditions are very clear. No physical relationship, separate bedrooms, public appearances only when required. Absolute confidentiality. The marriage will be dissolved at the end of 7 days with no further obligations on either side. 7 days. Claire's fingers tighten around the pen. Somewhere deep inside, a small voice asks what kind of woman agrees to this. The internet would have an answer. So would her friends, if she had told them. Gold digger, desperate, shameless. But none of them were there when her mother squeezed her hand and whispered, "Do not ruin your life for me." Claire exhales slowly. "I understand the terms," she says. Her voice surprises her. It does not shake. The man nods once. Not in triumph, not in relief, more like acceptance. As Claire lowers the pen to the page, she does not know that this marriage is not what it seems. She does not know that the next 7 days will test everything she believes about dignity, power, and truth. And she certainly does not know that the most shocking part of this agreement has nothing to do with money at all. The ink touches paper, and the contract begins. The marriage license is filed the same afternoon. There is no ceremony, no music, no witnesses beyond the lawyer and a quiet clerk who does not ask questions. Claire stands beside the man she has just agreed to marry, her hand resting at her side, fingers stiff, as if they belong to someone else. When the clerk slides the papers across the counter and offers a polite smile, Claire forces one in return. Just like that, it is done. By early evening, a black sedan pulls up in front of the building. The driver opens the door without speaking. Claire hesitates for half a second before stepping inside. The door closes with a soft, final sound that makes her chest tighten. As the car moves through the city, she watches familiar streets pass by the window. A grocery store where she used to count every dollar. A bus stop she knows by heart. A coffee shop where she once spent 3 hours on her laptop, pretending to be busy because she had nowhere else to go. She realizes she is leaving that version of herself behind, even if only for 7 days. The man beside her sits quietly, his gaze forward. He does not reach for her hand. He does not try to fill the silence. That, somehow, makes it easier. When the car stops, Claire looks up and freezes. The house is not a mansion in the way she expected. There are no gates, no fountains, no excess. It is large, yes, but restrained. Brick, white trim, old trees lining the driveway, the kind of home built to last, not to impress. Inside, everything smells faintly of wood, polish, and lemon. The floors gleam. The walls are lined with framed photographs, landscapes, black and white city shots. Nothing personal enough to reveal a family. A woman in her late 50s greets them calmly. She introduces herself as Margaret, the house manager. Her tone is professional, respectful, but her eyes linger on Claire just long enough to make her aware of herself again, of who she is supposed to be now. "This way, please," Margaret says. They walk down a quiet hallway before stopping at a closed door. "This will be your room," Margaret explains. Claire blinks. "My room?" "Yes," the man says evenly. "My room is at the other end of the hall." He looks at her then, not unkindly. "It is exactly as the agreement states." "That is 2,000. Claire nods, swallowing whatever reaction tries to surface. She should be relieved. Instead, she feels oddly exposed, as if the distance between their rooms makes everything more real. Later that night, after a simple dinner eaten mostly in silence, the lawyer returns briefly to review the terms once more. This time, they are spoken aloud. 7 days. Separate bedrooms. No physical contact. Public appearances only when necessary. No emotional expectations. Claire listens carefully, committing each word to memory. These rules are not just boundaries, they are armor. When the lawyer leaves, the house settles into a deep, echoing quiet. Claire stands alone in her room, suitcase at her feet. The space is beautiful, neutral colors, crisp white sheets, a window that looks out over the trees. Anyone else might have called this luxury. Claire sits on the edge of the bed and finally allows herself to breathe. This is temporary, she reminds herself. 7 days. That is all. She reaches into her bag and pulls out her phone. There is a message from the hospital. Update requested. She types a quick response, fingers steady now. Everything is handled. Do not worry. She does not say how. Down the hall, the man stands in his own room, looking at a copy of the same contract Claire just memorized. He closes the folder slowly, as if sealing something away. 7 days, he thinks. Neither of them knows it yet, but the rules they agreed to are already being tested, and tomorrow the world will begin to watch. Morning arrives quietly, without ceremony. Claire wakes before the alarm, disoriented for a moment by the unfamiliar ceiling above her. Sunlight filters through the curtains, softer than the light in her old apartment, warmer too. For a brief second, she forgets where she is. Then the weight of the last 24 hours settles back into place. 7 days. She dresses carefully, choosing simple clothes she packed on instinct rather than style. When she steps into the hallway, the house already feels awake. Voices carry faintly from downstairs. Dishes clink. The smell of coffee drifts upward. At the breakfast table, he is already seated, reading a newspaper, as if this were an ordinary morning. He looks up when she enters, nodding once in greeting. "Good morning," he says. "Good morning," Claire replies. Margaret sets a cup of coffee in front of her without comment. Toast, fruit, everything arranged neatly, precisely. Claire notices that no one asks how she slept. No one asks how she is feeling. This is not rudeness. It is respect for the distance they agreed upon. After breakfast, Margaret gestures toward the sitting room. "We have a schedule prepared for you today, Mrs. Whitmore." The name lands heavier than Claire expects. Mrs. Whitmore. She forces herself not to react. Instead, she nods and follows. The sitting room has been converted into something that feels halfway between a classroom and a fitting studio. A woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice introduces herself as Evelyn, etiquette consultant, public relations advisor. Temporary. This will not be difficult, Evelyn says, smiling politely. We are not changing who you are. We are simply making sure the world does not misunderstand you. Claire almost laughs at that. The first lesson is posture. How to stand beside him without clinging or shrinking. How to walk at his pace without appearing led. Where to place her hands when cameras are present. Where to look. Then comes speech. Not what to say, but what not to say. No personal details, no backstory, no explanations. If asked how they met, the answer is simple and vague. Through mutual acquaintances, at the right time. By mid-morning, a garment bag arrives. Inside is a navy blue dress, elegant and understated, paired with low heels. Claire runs her fingers over the fabric, surprised by how well it fits. This evening, Evelyn explains, there will be a small charity dinner, nothing dramatic. It is already on his calendar. Your presence was expected once the marriage became public. Public. The word tightens Claire's chest. The announcement goes live just after noon. Claire watches it on a tablet from the sitting room couch. A photograph appears first, carefully chosen, neutral, then the headline. Prominent philanthropist marries quietly. Details limited. Within minutes, her phone begins to vibrate. Messages from people she has not spoken to in years, some curious, some congratulatory, some unmistakably judgmental, disguised as concern. She does not respond. By the time the car pulls up that evening, Claire feels like she has lived several days inside one. She steps into the navy dress, smooths it down, and takes a steadying breath. At the front door, he waits. For the first time, he offers his arm. Not possessive, not intimate, simply correct. As they step outside, cameras flash from across the street. Voices call out questions that blur together. Claire keeps her face composed, her posture steady, exactly as she was taught. Inside the car, silence returns. You handled that well, he says quietly. Thank you, she replies. It is not affection, it is acknowledgement. As the city lights pass by, Claire stares out the window, aware of how quickly the world has decided who she is now. And somewhere beneath the calm surface, a question begins to form, one she is not ready to answer yet. What happens if she fails the role she never asked to play? The dinner awaits, and with it, the first real test of the contract they both believe they control. The charity dinner takes place in a historic hotel downtown, the kind with chandeliers that glow softly rather than sparkle. Everything about the room feels deliberate, polished, measured. Claire becomes aware of the stares the moment they enter. They are not hostile, not exactly. Curious, evaluating. People glance at her ring first, then at her face, as if trying to reconcile the two. She keeps her expression calm, her posture steady, just as she was taught. He guides her through the room with a light hand at her back, never lingering, never gripping. To anyone watching, they look practiced, established, like a couple that has existed longer than a single day. Introductions begin almost immediately. This is my wife, Claire, he says to a woman in a silver dress. Claire smiles. It is nice to meet you. She says it again and again. Different faces, same words, each time. The title lands with a quiet shock. My wife. It does not feel real, but it feels permanent enough to be dangerous. At their table, Claire notices a younger woman seated across from them, immaculately dressed, confident. Her gaze flicks between Claire and the man beside her with thinly veiled interest. So, the woman says lightly, lifting her glass. This was quite the surprise. The air tightens. Claire waits. This is not her place to speak. Not yet. Yes, he replies calmly. Life has a way of doing that. Again. The woman smiles, but there is something sharp beneath it. We all assumed you had given up on marriage. Claire feels the weight of the sentence land squarely on her shoulders. He does not look at her. Assumptions are often inaccurate. Dinner is served. Conversation moves on, but the undercurrent remains. Halfway through the meal, the tension shifts. A waiter approaches another table nearby, his hands trembling slightly as he sets down a tray. One glass slips. It shatters loudly against the floor, drawing every eye in the room. The young waiter freezes. The woman in silver sighs dramatically. Unbelievable, she mutters. These charity events always attract incompetence. A man at the table laughs. At least he is not charging admission for the show. The waiter's face drains of color. He bends to clean the mess, hands shaking worse now. Claire watches him closely. He cannot be more than 19. Too thin, too anxious, trying desperately to disappear. The agreement flashes through her mind. No emotional involvement, no public disruption. Claire stands. The room quiets, surprised. She steps toward the waiter and kneels beside him, ignoring the murmurs that ripple outward. It is all right, she says gently. No one is hurt. She takes the cloth from his hand and helps gather the broken glass, careful, unhurried. I am so sorry, the waiter whispers. I did not mean to. I know, Claire replies. Take a breath. Accidents happen. Margaret appears quickly, ready to intervene, but Claire shakes her head once. I have it, she says softly. When the glass is cleared, Claire rises and meets the eyes of the guests still watching. It is easy to forget, she says, her voice steady, that we are all human, no matter where we are standing. The room is silent. Claire returns to her seat, heart pounding. She does not look at him immediately. When she does, his expression is unreadable. The woman across from them forces a laugh. Well, that was unexpected. Yes, he says quietly. It was. The rest of the evening passes without incident, but something has changed. In the car afterward, silence stretches between them longer than before. You did not have to do that, he says finally. I know, Claire replies. You broke the rules. Yes. A pause. And yet, he says slowly, you did not embarrass anyone, including me. Claire looks down at her hands. I did not think about that. I believe you. The car continues through the darkened streets. For the first time since the contract was signed, neither of them feels entirely certain who is in control anymore. And tomorrow, the consequences of that moment will begin to unfold. The next morning, the headlines arrive before breakfast. Claire sees them on her phone as she sits at the kitchen island, coffee cooling untouched beside her. The photograph from the night before has already been cropped, reframed, and distributed. Her face is calm, his is composed. The caption is polite, almost admiring. New wife shows grace at charity dinner. Grace. The word feels strange, like clothing borrowed from someone else. Across the room, he stands by the window, reading the same coverage on a tablet. He does not comment, he does not smile, but he does not look displeased either. By mid-morning, the house fills with quiet movement. Margaret walks in and out with purpose. A call is taken behind closed doors. Then another. Claire senses it before anyone says it out loud. The moment from last night did not go unnoticed. Shortly before noon, he asks Claire to join him in the study. The room is darker than the rest of the house, lined with shelves of books that look read, not decorative. He gestures for her to sit. He remains standing. There will be a board luncheon this afternoon, he says. It was not on your schedule. Tensta, end quote. Indvelia. Claire nods slowly. I understand. You are not required to attend, he continues, but your presence would be observed. There it is, the test she did not know she had stepped into. Who will be there, she asks. People who believe they understand how this world works, he replies evenly. People who do not like surprises. Claire exhales. And last night was a surprise. Yes. A pause stretches between them. If I attend, Claire says carefully, I will not pretend to be someone I am not. He studies her for a long moment. I would expect nothing else. The luncheon takes place in a private dining room at the headquarters of his foundation. Glass walls, long table, city skyline in the distance. When Claire enters beside him, the conversations falter just slightly, enough for her to notice. These people are different from the guests at the charity dinner, sharper, more guarded. Their smiles do not reach their eyes. Introductions are made again, titles emphasized, credentials recited. Claire listens more than she speaks. Midway through the meal, the discussion turns toward funding allocations, numbers, projections, strategic cuts. One of the board members, a man with an impeccable suit and an impatient tone, taps his pen against the table. We need to be realistic, he says. The outreach program in the South Side is draining resources. Low return. Minimal visibility. Claire stiffens slightly. She recognizes the neighborhood he mentions. She has stood in its grocery lines. She has waited for buses there. Another board member nods. I agree. Sentiment cannot dictate strategy. The agreement echoes around the table. Claire feels the contract press against her ribs like a warning. No interference, no opinions. She glances at him. His expression is neutral. He does not look at her. He does not rescue her. So Claire speaks. "May I ask a question?" she says calmly. The room stills. The man with the pen looks irritated. "Of course. When you say low return," Claire continues, "what exactly are you measuring?" "Public impact," he replies. "Donations, recognition, and not outcomes," she asks. "Not how many families remain housed, how many children stay in school, how many people do not end up needing emergency care later." There is an uncomfortable shift in seats. "This is not personal," the man says curtly. "No," Claire agrees, "but it is human." Someone scoffs quietly. Claire does not raise her voice. She does not lean forward. She simply finishes. "If the goal of this foundation is to look effective, then you are right. Cut the program. But if the goal is to actually change lives, then maybe the problem is not the return. Maybe it is where you are choosing to look." Silence settles over the table. For the first time, he turns to look at her. Not with surprise, with recognition. The luncheon ends shortly after. In the elevator ride down, neither of them speaks. When the doors finally close and the building fades behind them, he exhales slowly. "You were not wrong," he says. "I know," Claire replies, "but I also know I crossed another line." "Yes," he says, "you did." A pause. "And I would like you to keep doing it." Claire looks at him, startled. "The contract still stands," he continues, "but the board needed to see what you showed them. Integrity does not announce itself, it reveals itself." The city passes by outside the window. Claire absorbs his words carefully. For the first time since this arrangement began, she wonders if the contract was never meant to protect him at all. And somewhere deep inside, a different kind of risk begins to take shape. That night, the house feels different. Not louder, not warmer, just altered, as if the walls themselves are aware that something has shifted and are holding their breath. Claire changes into comfortable clothes and pads quietly down the hallway, intending to retreat to her room and let the day drain out of her. But as she passes the study, she notices the light still on. He is inside, standing by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. The city glows faintly beyond the glass. She hesitates. "I did not mean to interrupt," she says. "You are not," he replies without turning. "I was hoping you would come in." Claire steps inside and stops a few feet away, uncertain where to place herself now that the rules feel thinner than they did this morning. For a moment, neither of them speaks. "You embarrassed several people today," he says finally. Claire nods. "I assumed that would happen, and you may have complicated things for me," he adds. "I know." A pause. "Thank you," he finishes quietly. Claire looks up, surprised. He turns to face her then, and for the first time, there is no distance in his expression, no calculation, just something tired and honest. "You should know something," he says. "I did not build my life to be admired. I built it to be controlled." Claire does not interrupt. "For years, I told myself that order was the same as purpose, that if everything stayed predictable, nothing could hurt me." He exhales slowly. "I was wrong. Too. Is actually a waiter a bin dat? On four." Claire shifts slightly, resting her hands together. "What changed?" "My first marriage," he says simply. "I loved her, or I believed I did. But when things became difficult, I chose structure over compassion. She chose to leave." The admission hangs in the air. "I learned from that," he continues. "Or at least I thought I did. I learned how to never be vulnerable again." Claire feels the weight of his words settle in her chest. "And this marriage?" she asks carefully. "What did you learn from that?" He meets her eyes. "That I am very good at hiding behind agreements." The silence that follows is not uncomfortable. It is fragile. Claire takes a slow breath. "I did not come here to change you," she says. "I came here because I needed help." "That is the truth." "I know," he replies. "That is why I trusted you." The word lands between them, unexpected and heavy. "I do not think you trust easily," Claire says. "No," he agrees. "I do not." However, they stand there, closer than they have been since the contract was signed, yet still careful not to cross an invisible line. "I should apologize," Claire says after a moment, "for breaking the rules." "You should," he says. She waits. "But I will not ask you to stop," he continues. "What you did today reminded me of why this foundation exists. Not for reports, not for appearances, for people. Claire allows herself a small smile. People are messy. Yes, he says. That is why I tried to avoid them. Another pause. Outside, a siren wails briefly in the distance, grounding the moment in reality. You can leave, he says softly. If this is becoming too much. Claire considers that. The option feels real, accessible. I am not ready to leave, she says finally. But I need to know something. He nods. When the 7 days end, she asks, will this arrangement disappear like it never mattered? He does not answer right away. I do not know, he admits. That uncertainty is new for me. Claire absorbs that, her heartbeat steady but present. I think, she says slowly, that uncertainty is the only honest part of this whole thing. For the first time, he smiles, not politely, not strategically, genuinely. As Claire turns to leave, she realizes that the most dangerous rule they agreed to was never written down at all. Do not feel anything. And tonight, that rule feels impossible to keep. The reveal does not arrive quietly. It comes the next afternoon, wrapped in formality and delivered with precision. Claire is in the sitting room reviewing notes Evelyn left behind when Margaret appears at the doorway, her expression unreadable. There is a meeting in the main conference room, Margaret says. You are requested to attend. Requested, not invited. Claire's pulse quickens. Who will be there? Family, legal counsel, members of the board, Margaret replies. And you, I've quote. The room is already full when Claire enters. He stands at the head of the table, composed as ever, his presence anchoring the space. Along both sides sit people Claire recognizes, from photographs and brief introductions, his adult children, a brother, 2 senior board members, and the same lawyer who oversaw the contract. Every conversation stops when she walks in. Please, the lawyer says, gesturing to an empty chair. Have a seat, Mrs. Whitmore. The name feels different now, heavier. Claire sits, folding her hands together to keep them steady. The lawyer clears his throat. We are here to address concerns that have arisen regarding the recent marriage and its implications. Concerns. Claire almost smiles. One of the board members leans forward. This arrangement has caused unnecessary disruption, media attention, internal confusion. A woman across the table, his daughter, speaks next. Her tone is polite but sharp. With all due respect, Father, this decision has placed the family in an awkward position. Claire looks to him, waiting for direction. He does not intervene. Instead, the lawyer slides a folder across the table toward Claire. Before we continue, the lawyer says, there is information you should see. Claire hesitates, then opens it. Her breath catches. Inside are documents, financial statements, amendments, a revised estate plan. Her eyes skim the words, disbelief rising with every line. The marriage contract, the 7 days, the conditions, all of it is referenced as part of a broader clause, a moral evaluation. Claire looks up sharply. What is this? The lawyer does not answer. He does. This marriage, he says evenly, was never about appearances alone. Claire's chest tightens. Then what was it about? Eligibility, he replies. The word lands like a blow. He continues, his voice steady, controlled, almost painfully honest. My estate is not simple. Control of my foundation, my companies, my assets, all of it depends on a final amendment to my will, one that requires clear evidence of character. Claire shakes her head slowly. Evidence of whose character? Everyone's, he says, including yours. The room is silent. You tested me, Claire says, her voice low. Yes. The admission ripples through the table. His brother scoffs. We warned him this was reckless. His daughter crosses her arms. So this is some kind of experiment. It was a safeguard, he corrects, against manipulation, against entitlement, against people who confuse proximity to wealth with worth. Claire stands abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. You used my life as leverage, she says, her voice shaking now despite her effort. My mother, my desperation. He does not deny it. That hurts more than an argument would. I needed to know who you were when no one was watching, he says quietly, when power did not protect you. Claire laughs once, hollow. And if I had failed, then the contract would have ended as written, he replies, and the trust would have remained closed to you. To me? Claire repeats. Or to anyone like me? The question hangs unanswered. The lawyer interjects carefully. For clarity, Mrs. Whitmore. The revised will places decision-making authority over the foundation in the hands of the spouse, provided the moral criteria is met. Claire looks down at the papers again. The truth crystallizes all at once. This was not a marriage of convenience. It was a test, a public one, a cruel one. Claire closes the folder and pushes it away. "You should have told me," she says. "Yes," he agrees. "I should have." "And you did not," she continues, meeting his eyes, "because you wanted to see how far I would go without knowing the rules." His silence is confirmation enough. Claire straightens. "Then let me be very clear." She reaches for the ring on her finger, sliding it off and placing it on the table between them. "I did not agree to be evaluated," she says, "and I will not stay where honesty is conditional." The room holds its breath. "I am leaving," Claire finishes. "Not because I failed your test, but because you failed mine." If regions. She turns toward the door. Behind her, for the first time, his composure cracks. "Claire," he says. She stops, but does not turn around. "This arrangement," he says quietly, "has consequences I did not anticipate." "So does deception," she replies. And with that, she walks out, leaving behind the contract, the ring, and a room full of people who finally understand what they have lost. Claire does not go back to the house. She checks into a modest hotel across town, the kind with neutral walls and a quiet lobby that asks no questions. The room is clean, simple, safe. That night, she sits on the edge of the bed and finally allows the anger to surface, sharp and unfiltered. She was not naive. She was not reckless. She was honest. And that honesty was used against her. By morning, the story has shifted. Messages flood her phone, not from strangers this time, but from sources she recognizes. Journalists, foundation staff. One text stands out, brief and urgent, from Margaret. "He has called an emergency board session. Public." Claire stares at the screen for a long moment before replying. "I will not attend." The reply comes almost immediately. He has dismissed 2 board members, including his brother. That stops her. Across the city, the conference room is tense. He stands alone at the head of the table, the ring Claire left behind resting beside a thick folder of documents. His voice is calm, but there is no mistaking the finality in it. The moral evaluation clause was intended to protect this foundation, he says. Instead, it exposed something else entirely. His brother interrupts angrily. "You are overreacting." "No," he replies. "I am correcting." He opens the folder and slides copies across the table. Internal emails, financial maneuvers, quiet attempts to redirect funds away from community programs and into private interests. The room stiffens. "You were not concerned about reputation," he continues. "You were concerned about control." Silence follows. By the end of the meeting, resignations are accepted. Votes are recorded. The foundation's governance structure is rewritten in a single afternoon. And for the first time in years, the decisions are not made to preserve power, but to restore purpose. That evening, he stands alone in the empty house. He looks at the contract one last time, then signs his name across the termination clause in bold ink. He folds the paper carefully, not as a legal act, but as an acknowledgement of fault. He does not call Claire immediately. Instead, he goes to the hospital. Claire's mother is resting when he arrives, unaware of who he is. He speaks quietly with the attending physician, settles the accounts without ceremony, and leaves instructions for continued care. No name attached, no explanation given. 2 days later, Claire receives a message from the hospital confirming that every charge has been cleared, permanently. She knows who did it. Her phone rings shortly after. It is him. "I am not calling to ask you to come back," he says when she answers. "I am calling to tell you that the contract is over. Officially, publicly." Claire closes her eyes. "And the foundation?" she asks. "It is no longer protected by silence," he replies, "or by me." There is a pause. "I was wrong," he continues. "Not because I tested you, but because I believed the test mattered more than the truth." Claire exhales slowly. "You cannot undo that," she says. "I know," he replies, "but I can choose what happens next." She does not answer right away. For the first time since they met, there is no agreement binding them, no rules defining the space between them, only choice. And that, Claire realizes, changes everything. The press conference takes place a week later, not in a ballroom, not on a stage, just a quiet room at the foundation headquarters, sunlight coming through tall windows, chairs set in neat rows. There are no banners, No dramatic announcements promised in advance. Claire sits in the back, unnoticed. She almost did not come. But when the invitation arrived, addressed to her personally and signed only with his name, she felt something settle inside her. Not hope, not yet, just curiosity. He steps forward when the room fills. He looks older somehow, not weaker, lighter. "I am here to formally dissolve a marriage that should never have required a contract," he begins, "and to publicly acknowledge the person who changed this foundation by refusing to play a role written for her." A murmur moves through the room. "I entered an agreement believing control was safety," he continues. "I was wrong. Integrity does not need leverage, it needs courage." He pauses, then looks directly toward the back of the room. "Claire," he says, clearly. Every head turns. Claire does not stand. She does not need to. "This foundation will now be led by values, not appearances," he says, "and I will spend the rest of my time earning trust I once thought I could evaluate." The conference ends without applause. Later, outside, Claire waits beneath a row of trees lining the sidewalk. She is not sure what she is waiting for until he steps out and stops a few feet away from her. No lawyers, no assistants, just him. "I did not invite you to convince you," he says. "I invited you to tell you the truth in public." Claire studies him. "That matters," she says, "but it does not erase what happened." "I know," he replies. "That is why I am not asking for forgiveness." He reaches into his coat pocket and pulls out something small, not a ring, a folded piece of paper. "It is the original contract," he says. "Unsigned, terminated. I keep it to remember who I was." He hands it to her. "And this," he continues, his voice steady but unguarded, "is the only question I will ever ask you." He meets her eyes. "Would you consider starting something real, without agreements, without protection, without 7 days attached to it? If the answer is no, I will accept it." The city moves around them. Cars pass. A breeze lifts the leaves overhead. Claire takes a breath. She thinks of the hospital room now quiet, of the house she almost lost, of the man who finally chose truth over control. She nods once. "Yes," she says, but slowly, as equals. His smile is not grand. It is grateful. They walk away together, not as a contract fulfilled, but as two people choosing something honest. And for the first time, nothing binds them except that choice.